Hey guys, so we're going to be talking today about in our paragraph portfolio and in literary analysis writing, how do we incorporate quotes, meaning how do we introduce them, and then how do we properly include and cite them in our paragraph. So this is actually a continuation of the presentation that we did together in our Zoom earlier this week. Okay, so obviously the most important thing is going to be that you find a theme. You want to figure out the theme that you want to write about in your paragraph portfolio. The next step before we can include evidence in our paragraph is to figure out what we're going to say and what evidence we're going to use. So a trick that helps me when I'm writing is that the ideas should be mine. So the paragraph should make sense without any evidence. And then you can add in the evidence to help support your own reasoning, okay? Even if this is a text-based analysis, we want to start with the ideas and support with the evidence, not the other way around. So once you've figured out what you want to say about a theme, you're going to choose the best quotes to support that theme. So take this example, okay? Which do you think would be the best quote to support this topic sentence? So one theme in Speak by Laurie Hall Sanderson is that when people are isolated, they stop believing they should keep going. So take a minute to look at your options. Is it A, maybe I'll be an artist if I grow up? B, I put the gown back. There's nothing wrong with me. These are really sick people, sick that you can see. Or C, I opened a paperclip and scratched across the inside of my left wrist. Pitiful. If suicide is a cry for help, then what is this? A whimper? A peep? All right, so we may know about this book that Melinda Sordino is a freshman in high school who feels very isolated because she called the cops at a party and now everyone hates her. But which of these quotes best supports that when Melinda is isolated, she believes that she should stop going or doesn't believe that she should keep going? So a lot of people would say maybe C, because this is a very, I don't want to call it a graphic quote, but it definitely speaks to self-harm, issues of self-esteem, okay? But the best evidence would probably be A. Maybe I'll be an artist if I grow up. So if you look at your evidence as a piece of close reading, what is the author actually having the character say, or what is the author actually saying with their language? One is obviously a cry for help, but Melinda could be more extreme. She's obviously choosing to keep going. Whereas in A, if I grow up, tells us that Melinda's thinking maybe she won't keep going. Maybe she won't grow up. Okay, so that's what we mean when we say best evidence. This would be a lot easier to explain in the way of she doesn't think she should keep going if she's talking about maybe not growing up, okay? So what you want to do once you have your theme is think of a couple events that help show this theme. So something a character does, something they say, go back through the book and find some evidence, okay? This doesn't have to be dialogue. So when we talk about evidence or quotes, it doesn't have to be something a character says. It's any line of text that supports the theme you think is the strongest in the novel. And then we need to incorporate this. So once you have your piece of textual evidence, feel free to pause me while you go find it. Note the page number. You will definitely need the page number. There are two different ways that we can cite a quote. Okay, so this means giving credit to the author. So you can mention the author's name in your writing. So according to Laurie Hall Sanderson, or You cannot mention the author's name in the writing and use parenthetical citations, okay, meaning in parentheses. Now, the thing with literature is that the author is never actually saying anything. Her characters or his characters are saying things. The narrator says things, okay? So it could look like this. Ray Bradbury writes, and then insert the quote on page 80. Or according to Bradbury, quote, page 80. But what we are going to do is this second one, where you do not mention the author's name. Okay, so we'll just have the quote, and then the author's last name and the page number. Now, why do we have to do this? Well, since Ray Bradbury doesn't actually say anything in his work of fiction, we can't say Bradbury states, quote, "Are you happy?" Because it's not Ray Bradbury saying that, although technically it is, it's Clarice saying that. So instead you could say, Clarice says, "Are you happy?" And then in the parentheses, we would put Bradbury, 9. So before you move on with your evidence, put your citation at the end of your evidence. Okay, so you can copy and paste, or you can read out of the book and type the quotes you think you'll use into your paragraph 2 prompt space. Okay, so you'll have a theme and then a piece of evidence, and put that citation. So it's either going to say Bradbury 9 or whatever page number, Halse Anderson and a page number, or album and a page number. Okay, whichever book you're reading. All right, once you've done that, feel free to pause me if you need more time to move on. Let's talk about how to put this into your paragraph. So now that you have a piece of textual evidence and you have a citation, you need to know how to properly incorporate this quote. So we can't just write the quote in the middle of our paragraph and then not introduce it or not explain it. We call that quote dropping, okay? Instead, it needs an introduction, as if it's someone coming onto a stage. And you have some choice about how you want to do this. You can either write a whole sentence to introduce the quote and then include the quote, or you can jam the quote into another sentence. So here's an example of how to write a separate sentence introduction. So this is from To Kill a Mockingbird, which I know some of you guys have read. So you could say, one example which proves that people tend to cling to immaturity, which is a theme from Mockingbird, is when Jem explains the punishment Mrs. Dubose has given him, which he finds excessive. So in this sentence, we've explained what the theme is, like that this is an example of a theme, and then we've introduced it with context. So the word context okay, you're going to see it a lot. The word context is basically talking about like what is happening when this goes on. Like what is the quote a part of within the book, okay? Either way, you're going to need context. Okay, so one example which proves that people tend to cling to immaturity is when Jem explains the punishment Mrs. Dubose has given him, which he finds excessive. And then the quote, she says she wants me to come every afternoon and read out loud to her for 2 hours, and she wants me to do it for a month. The author there is Harper Lee, so it's Lee, and then page 105. So a few things I want to point out to you guys. So we have the theme, we have the context, what's happening in the story. If your evidence includes an actual quote, so someone talking, you need quotation marks, double quotation marks, around anything you're taking from the text itself, and then single quotation marks around anything the character is actually saying. Okay, so in this case, both sentences are coming out of Jem's mouth, and then that's where the quote ends. Another thing you should notice is that the period does not come at the end of this sentence, even though there would be a period here in the book. You put the period after the citation. So introduction, evidence in quotation marks, single quotation marks around anything said out loud by a character, end quotation marks, parentheses with author's name and page number, and then the period at the very end. Okay, so let's talk about if you want to put it into the same sentence. So this typically works better if your evidence is just part of a sentence, or if you're stealing like just a phrase. So longer evidence needs a whole sentence to introduce it, and shorter quotes can be worked into a greater sentence. So you're still going to introduce with the theme and with some context. So one time the theme of it being wrong to punish innocent people is when Atticus tells the children that it is a sin to kill a mockingbird while they are learning to shoot. So our context is sort of built into this example. This is something he's saying while they are learning to shoot is the context, and the theme is up front. It's wrong to punish innocent people. And then Atticus tells the children that it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. So still we have quotation marks, double quotations around what we're taking from the text, single quotations around what someone is saying. Now, another thing that's added to this is that our citation, no matter where our sentence ends, our citation goes at the end of the sentence that includes the quote. So if it's just the quote, the citation goes at the end of the quote. If you're working that quote or evidence into a bigger sentence, you still put this citation at the very end. The other thing is that if you need to change capitalization, so in the book, this would be a capital I. It is the first word that Atticus says out loud. Since it would not be capitalized if the quote was not here, it's still not capitalized within the quote, but we have to include these brackets to show that we changed the capitalization. You can also do this if you need to change the tense of a verb. So you could say it was a sin to kill a mockingbird. You could change that, but try to do this in a way that makes minimal changes, because you want to be very, very sure that you're not changing the meaning of the text if you change the evidence you're using. Okay. So just one more example of introducing with context. So this is from the 5 People You Meet in Heaven. One example that proves that disappointment is an essential part of life, okay, that's our theme, we're introducing one example, is when Eddie finds out that Ruby Pier is his heaven. So that's our context. No. Eddie shook his head violently. No. Album 34. So there's our citation. Okay, this also shows you what to do if there is speaking. There should actually be another quotation mark here. And then narration, Eddie shook his head violently, and then more speaking, all in the same one. Now, the other thing that changes is that if there is something other than a period at the end of your quote, if there is a question mark, like, are you happy? Or if there's an exclamation point, like, no, then you want to leave that in because that's important to the meaning of the text, and still put a period after your citation. Okay, so your job now is to start writing that second paragraph. So you have your theme, you have your evidence. You must have at least one piece of evidence properly incorporated and cited in this paragraph. 2 is ideal, but you need to decide, how will you incorporate these quotes? Do you want them in a separate sentence? Do you want them in the same sentence? One way to think of this is if you don't have a lot to say on the topic, it might be best to write an introduction sentence and then put the quote in so that you have more to say. If you have a lot to say, maybe work it into the same sentence if you can. All right, guys, so that is how to incorporate evidence. If you have any questions, please let me know. Like I did last week, I'll be looking over your paragraphs before you turn them in. So on your in-class day or in my spare time, I'll be going through and leaving comments for everybody. And if you need a writing conference, just email me and I'll schedule you. Let me know if you prefer during the day, during 4th period, or after school. Have a great day.